Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Missy Palazzi and I'm a staff developer with the Lincoln Intermediate Unit. In your role as a paraeducator, whether you support an elementary, intermediate, or secondary environment, you function as a critical language bridge for your students. Today, our focus is on a foundational understanding of the three-tier vocabulary framework and techniques you can use with your students. To make this self-paced virtual environment as inclusive and interactive as possible, please engage with this recording in whatever way you feel most comfortable. Even though this is pre-recorded, we're going to use active reflection practices to ensure this content sticks. To understand why vocabulary can make or break learning, we have to look briefly at the science of learning, which tracks information across three phases: senses, slots, and schema. Everything a student experiences enters through sensory memory. From there, it moves into our slots, which represents our short-term memory or working memory. Working memory has very strict limitation. It generally holds only about 4 units or chunks of information at a time, and it lasts for a mere 10 to 15 seconds unless it is actively rehearsed. Our ultimate goal as educators is to get information encoded and stored into the schema, which is the long-term memory. Long-term memory has no capacity limits and can hold information from minutes to an entire lifetime. But what happens when that middle step, the working memory slot, gets overloaded? Let's take a look at cognitive load theory on our next slide. Think of working memory like a student's mental workspace or computer RAM. It has a limited number of slots to hold information. Cognitive load is simply the total mental effort being used in that working memory space at any given second. When our students encounter unfamiliar words in text or assignments or standardized testing, it causes a massive spike in cognitive load. If they don't know what the word means, their working memory becomes completely overloaded just trying to decode and decipher the language, leaving absolutely zero mental space for actual reading comprehension. To protect our students from this mental bottleneck, here are 3 actionable steps you can use daily. First, keep prompts short. Use concise, direct phrases like, use the word analyze to describe this graph instead of long-winded sentences that eat up all their working memory slots. Second, limit targets. Focus on a maximum of 2 new words per lesson to prevent flooding of their workspace. And third, praise effort, correct gently. If a student uses an academic word incorrectly, validate their brave attempt immediately and gently reframe it contextually. With this foundation of the brain in mind, let's look at the official objective of today's session. Our core focus today is to be able to accurately classify student vocabulary words into 3 functional tiers when presented with real-world classroom scenarios, so you can target your daily support. As we established, if the student doesn't understand the vocabulary terms embedded within text or instructional worksheets, their cognitive momentum breaks down completely. Your magic as a paraeducator happens in the side-by-side reinforcement time. Your role is to scaffold, prompt, and build real-time vocabulary bridges when a student is working in a small group, completing an independent assignment, or navigating a testing environment. To see exactly how vocabulary pairs with reading comprehension, let's review a highly validated framework called the simple view of reading. Originally proposed by Goff and Tunmer in 1986, the simple view of reading is a widely accepted educational model. At this time, please pause the video and access the slide deck to watch the short clip on the simple view of reading. Once you're finished watching the video, return back to this video. As you can see from the breakdown on the screen, a student might be excellent at sounding out letters, recognizing sight words, and blending sounds, which is the decoding column. Right here, the decoding column. But if they don't know what those words actually mean when they read them, which is the language comprehension column, their total reading comprehension score drops to 0. This is the language comprehension column. Vocabulary knowledge is the cornerstone of that language comprehension block, and that is exactly where our focus rests today. Now that we see where vocabulary fits mathematically in reading, let's look at the staggering data regarding why we must explicitly address it. Why is this our absolute focus? Renowned literacy researcher Dr. Kate Kinsella notes that vocabulary knowledge is the single greatest contributor to reading comprehension, and thus a strong predictor of overall academic achievement. Data reveals that a striking 70% of student reading comprehension barriers are directly rooted in vocabulary deficits. Students who enter school with robust vocabularies read more, which exposes them to more words, exponentially expanding their gap over their peers. Your real-time vocabulary scaffolding as a paraeducator is a primary tool for breaking the cycle and closing that gap. Look at the chart on the screen. Explicit vocabulary programs yield a massive 0.63 effect size, which sits safely in the zone of desired effects, indicating a substantial positive impact on student learning. Before we look at the tiers, we must recognize that knowing a word isn't black and white. Let's look at the 4 types of vocabulary. We process language through 4 distinct lenses. The listening vocabulary, the words we need to know to understand what we hear. Speaking vocabulary, the words we use when we talk. Reading vocabulary, the words we can decode and understand print. And writing vocabulary, the words we generate on paper. It's important to note that just because a student can speak, read, or write a vocabulary word does not mean they fully understand the word. They may be able to read the word analyzed beautifully out loud, but have absolutely no cognitive schema for what the action step the paper is asking them to perform. So how do we categorize these words to target our support? Let's take a look at the 3-tier framework. To target our side-by-side support, we use Dr. Isabel Beck's framework, which organizes language into 3 distinct levels or tiers. Think of it like a pyramid. Words are not inherently hard or easy. Instead, they are categorized strictly based on their utility and frequency across different environments. Tier 1 sits at the base as everyday conversational language. Tier 2 forms the middle layer as high utility academic words used across multiple school subjects. This is our core area of focus. And Tier 3 forms the apex as a specialized technical terms bound tightly to a specific subject. By understanding this pyramid, you can manage cognitive load effectively. You can identify and bridge Tier 2 words to prevent extraneous load and properly scaffold Tier 3 words so students can attach new words to long-term memory schema without experiencing a cognitive spike. Let's break down each tier individually, starting with Tier 1 at the base. Tier 1 consists of basic words that students encounter naturally through the everyday conversation, at home, at school, and in media. These are words like desk, run, happy, street, red, or sister. For most native English-speaking students, these words do not require explicit structured instruction in school. However, keep in mind that for your English learners or students with severe language delays, these Tier 1 words are vital building blocks that you may need to explicitly point out or translate during a lesson. To support them without overwhelming working memory, use dual coding by pairing the word with a visual anchor or sketch. Use total physical response by having them act out or mimic the word physically. Or use primary language bridges by providing a quick, direct native language translation, if fluent, to bypass decoding struggles. Now let's move up the pyramid to Tier 2, our absolute target zone. Tier 2 is our sweet spot. These are robust, high-frequency academic words found heavily across textbooks, writing prompts, and state assessment materials, but they are rarely utilized in casual playground talk. These are words like analyze, equivalent, predict, identify, contrast, and anxious. If a student does not master these cross-curricular processing words, they cannot accurately interpret instructions, regardless of how well they know the subject content. This tier is the ultimate access key for closing achievement gaps. When reinforcing Tier 2 words side by side, try the 7-second definition. Drop a fast, kid-friendly synonym immediately mid-sentence so reading momentum doesn't break. For example, the character was reluctant, that means he did not want to do it, to enter the room. You can also use sentence framing to scaffold their output, or a quick thumbs up, thumbs down game to test their understanding instantly without forcing a complex verbal explanation. Finally, let's look at the apex of the pyramid, Tier 3. Tier 3 words are highly specialized technical terms. They are low-frequency words that are limited strictly to specific domains or fields of study. Think mitosis in biology, ratio or hypotenuse in mathematics, feudalism in history, or even welding in a vocational technical course. These words are vital for understanding the specific unit being taught, but because they are highly abstract, they carry heavy cognitive loads. Your role here is to provide direct scaffolding, visual graphics, and a clear tactile anchors. You can use graphic organizers like a quick Foursquare Frere model to track characteristics and examples. You can use morphological analysis by breaking the word into structural roots, like teaching them that hydro means water, or utilize word wall references by physically pointing to a desktop visual chart to ease retrieval anxiety while they work. Now that we have reviewed all 3 layers of the framework, let's put your skills to the test with an interactive challenge. Let's put our skills to the test with our practice task. Tier that word. Please pause this recording right now for 5 minutes. Read through these 5 scenarios on your screen and classify each target word as Tier 1, Tier 2, or Tier 3 in your notes before pressing play. Welcome back. Let's review your classifications. Case 1 is Tier 3. It's strictly bound to historical content. Case 2 is Tier 2. Anxious is a mature academic synonym for worried. Case 3 is Tier 1. Shoe is everyday conversational language. Case 4 is Tier 3. Purely geometric and domain specific. Finally, Case 5 is Tier 2. Analyze is a major multi-subject power word. Fantastic job on this self-check. Now that you can categorize these words accurately, let's look at the specific delivery techniques you can use during independent seat work. As we shift into our tactical coaching delivery, let's remind ourselves of our core best practices to reduce cognitive load. First, keep prompts short and concise. Say, use the word analyze to describe this graph instead of overwhelming them with long setup sentences. Second, limit your targets to 2 or 3 new words per session so you don't flood their working memory. And third, praise the effort but correct the context gently. I absolutely love how you just tried to use our power word, furious. You are right that furious means feeling bad or upset, but we usually save the word furious for a massive giant problem. For a tiny paper cut that just stings a little bit, we would say we are annoyed or irritated. Let's break these techniques down into 3 categories: side-by-side support, on-the-fly support, and support outside the classroom. How do we systematically deliver this support during classroom seat work? We use a reliable 3-step coaching blueprint. Strategy 1 is clarify task prompts. Before a student even attempts an assignment, read the instruction verbs together. Ask them, the directions say to contrast these 2 characters. What is the prompt asking you to do when it says contrast? This prevents them from failing the work simply due to confusing direction verbs. Strategy 2 is metacognitive prompting. Don't just supply the definition immediately. Prompt their independent thinking by asking, what context clues in this sentence can help us make a smart guess? Strategy 3 is building a vocabulary bridge. If they remain completely stuck connecting that mature Tier 2 term back down to their simple Tier 1 everyday language base, tell them, the worksheet says hypothesis. That's just an academic word for an educated guess. That covers planned seat work, but what do you do when a student looks up and catches you completely off guard? Let's look at on-the-fly definitions. When a student looks up at you mid-lesson and directly asks, what does this word mean? We must avoid the traditional dictionary trap. If you define a complex academic word with an even more complex dictionary definition, student becomes twice as confused. Instead, use this simple formula to deliver an on-the-fly, student-friendly definition. Characterize the word, plus use common Tier 1 terms. For example, if a student asks what the word interpret means, say, to interpret means to explain the hidden meaning of an action or a story in plain, simple terms so that it makes sense to someone else. Keep your spontaneous explanations conversational, concrete, and clear. Remember, learning doesn't stop when the school bell rings. Let's look at how we can reinforce vocabulary outside the classroom. Language acquisition continues outside the classroom. Hallways, recess transitions, and the cafeteria are exceptionally rich vocabulary environments. Try strategy 1, the conversational upgrade. When a student shares a casual Tier 1 statement, simply echo their thoughts back to them using a more mature Tier 2 academic equivalent. If a student says, "I made a big change to my drawing," upgrade it by saying, "Ah, you modified your drawing." Or even try strategy 2, model professional routines. During transitions, replace casual commands with precise operational language. Instead of saying, "Hurry up and line up fast," try, "Let's assemble in an orderly fashion so we can stay on schedule." As we draw to a close, let's make this asynchronous training instantly actionable for you and your specific environment. On your screen are 2 active reflection prompts. First, real-time conversational upgrades. Write down one casual phrase you hear often from students or a phrase you say yourself. Script the exact Tier 2 academic upgrade you will use with students the next time. Number 2, domain-specific visual anchors. Choose a tough, abstract Tier 3 concept or vocabulary word your students are currently facing. Create a quick sketch to anchor their understanding or analogy to simplify it. Please pause this recording for the next 10 minutes. Select one of these 2 prompts and explicitly script out your strategy before hitting play for our final resource. Welcome back. I hope those scripted tools serve you well in the school year. Let's look at some deep dive resources available to you. For those of you who want to dive even deeper into cognitive science or the cognitive load theory we discussed at the beginning of the session, I included some resources for you to review later at your own pace. On the first slide of the presentation, you will find a link that will be a 1-page guide that summarizes some of the things that were in this presentation. You will also find my email in case you have any questions. On this final slide, there is an infographic for the advanced presentation. So if you're curious about the advanced presentation or more of an application using the FRAIR model, check out the infographic. Thank you all so much for your incredible time, your focused energy, and the invaluable dedication you bring to students. You truly are the day-to-day heartbeat of the classrooms. Have a fantastic school year. Keep building those language bridges, and thank you for your commitment to your students.